I'm Ross Harrison. I'm a fellow at the Middle East Institute and author of a new book called Decoding Iran's Foreign Policy. No, I don't think this means that the U.S., Israeli, and Iranian hostilities have ebbed at all. I mean, obviously, the most violent phase of the war is over, but the war is far from having been resolved. And it's not the first time that several Iranian leaders have been seen in public. Moshtaba Khamenei, the supreme leader's son, to my knowledge, has not been seen in public even now. Though President Pezeshkian and the Speaker of the Parliament, the Majlis, Golubov, has been seen in public before. But if you're asking me, do I think that the Israeli-U.S. hostilities against Iran have stopped? No, I don't, and I think the threat of Israeli reprisals or an assassination attempt against Iranian leaders, that threat still exists.
So, thank you, sir. That was very detailed. So, my next question for you is Iran likely to maintain control over the Strait of Hormuz in the future as well?
Well, I think it depends on how the war ends, frankly, and what is negotiated. I mean, clearly, Iran has demonstrated that it has the ability to use the Strait of Hormuz as leverage in the future in several ways. One, in terms of its ability to wreak havoc on its Gulf Arab states, the GCC states, using the Strait of Hormuz. And the other is by raising shipping costs and using the threat of violence in the Strait of Hormuz, using it as deterrent against shipping, raising the risk of shipping that would increase shipping costs and so forth. So whether in fact Iran institute some kind of a toll structure or some kind of fee for service, either on its own or in conjunction with Oman, that remains to be seen. And I think it also depends on how the war or how the conflict ends and what the reaction will be, not so much from the United States, but what the reaction will be from the GCC states and how they work out arrangements with Iran and how other stakeholders in the Gulf, such as China and India, how they react to this. And so I think at this point, it's really hard, since we're still in the no peace, no war period. It's very, very hard to ascertain how Iran is going to manage its use of the of the Strait as a deterrent, and how they're going to use, if in fact they're going to use it as some kind of a revenue stream that they will share with Oman. It's too early. In other words, it's too early to say at this point.
Understood, sir. So, Iran's leaders, they face a challenge right now. They are currently negotiating with the US for ensuring that the frozen assets are released. But there are also calls from the hardliners for the assassination of US President Trump, and these have grown popular during the funeral. So, how will the leaders manage this challenge?
Well, I'm not going to comment on any possible. I haven't seen the reports of an assassination order against the president of the United States. I mean, that would be all out. That would lead to an all out war. So I don't want to really comment on that one. But I can say that in terms of managing the hardliners, I think what we've seen in Iran is that prior to this war, when the late supreme leader Ali Khamenei, who is just being buried in the coming days, he hit the way in which he managed tensions within the Islamic Republic at the leadership level is he would adjudicate. So you would have the hardliners, what we call the principalists, and then he would have the pragmatists. Even though Moshtaba Khamenei is the putative successor to his father, he's maybe one among equals or the most powerful among equals, but it's much more of a consensual system, meaning that leaders come together, make decisions together, and particularly at this time during the war and in the aftermath of the war. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not opposition. There, as you indicate, there is opposition from hardliners, but at this point in time, those leaders that come from the principalist background and the pragmatist background, they seem to have come together. to make decisions during this time. But there is opposition, and I think they're just going to have to manage it. And frankly, we're not going to know how this tension, this sort of fractious tension, is managed until after the war is completely over, because you're likely during the war and during the period where there's a threat of a renewal of a war, you typically are going to get some kind of a consensus. If there's going to be splits and major factional disputes within the Islamic Republic ruling elite, you're likely to see it after the war, not during this phase.
Understood, sir. So, US under the Trump administration has claimed that Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, and that is successfully being deterred. So, how far is this claim true according to you? Can Iran ever develop a nuclear weapon in the future?
I'd like to step back from the question a little bit and give a bit of a broader context here. Remember that Iran's nuclear enrichment program. Now, remember, Iran never had a weapon. There was a fatwa issued by the late Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei against a nuclear weapon. What Iran had was moving towards what we call threshold capability or breakout capability. Enough highly enriched uranium, 90% and above. It already has enriched uranium to about 60%, but you need 90%. It was moving in that direction, but without having made the political decision to develop a nuclear weapon. And remember, that was not the only security asset that it believed it had. It had its missile program, its drone program, its regional proxies, and it had a sort of a national security doctrine that combined all of those things into a strategy. And what we're going to see after this war, because the last strategy that Iran had came out of the last big war that it fought, the Iran-Iraq War of 1980, 1988. What we're going to see after this war is another reconfiguration of Iran's national security strategy. So it's going to have to figure out what role, if in fact there is no final agreement with the United States on the nuclear file, they're going to have to make a decision whether moving towards a nuclear, further enrichment and a nuclear weapon, or at some point in time, whether that's going to act as a magnet and a boomerang for more hostility, or whether it's going to be something they need to do. But they're not going to do it in isolation. Remember, the Iranians have discovered sort of a new leverage point that's even more powerful in some ways than the nuclear enrichment program, and that is the Strait of Hormuz. So Iran's going to have to figure out how its axis of resistance, how its regional proxies, how its missile program, how its dormant at this point nuclear program, and how the Strait of Hormuz configure into a new strategic paradigm and a new strategic doctrine. And it remains to be seen how that's going to play out, given the question you asked before, which is the dynamic between some of the principalists, the sort of we call hardliners, and the pragmatists after the war ends.